All right, welcome back to Good Morning Kenya. If you're just joining us, don't worry, you are in time for the next discussion. We just had Ramaguko with that fantastic discussion on the whole question of security concern here. Now we want to just move along and go to matters to do with youth empowerment. And right now we're going to be focusing on a lady who has, gone out of her way to come up with a program that helps prepare our young adults for the employment phase of their life. And with us in studio, we have Esther Mwaniki. She is the CEO and founder of Lapid Leaders Africa, LLA. Yes?
Yes.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
We're glad you are here in time.
Thank you.
All right, and next to me, he is Moses Nganga, who is a student at Lapid Leaders Africa. So if you are a young person, you're watching us this morning, and you have any questions in regards to what this program is all about, or you'd like to know more about them personally, you can always reach out to them. I believe they will be giving us the social media handles in not too long, but if you have any questions that you feel could be addressed in this discussion, please feel free to send them through using the hashtag Good Morning Kenya on Twitter. My handle is the Jane Boy, and our official station handle at KBC Television. You could start by giving us the social media handles for the purpose of the benefit of our viewers, rather.
We are on at Lapid Leaders Africa on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of it at Lapid Leaders Africa.
All right. So simple, Lapid Leaders Africa. Somebody you think umengoa kidogo.
I know.
You say Lapid.
Lapid, L-A-P-I-D, Leaders Africa.
All right, so Lapid Leaders Africa. That is how you can find them across all social media platforms. Karibuni sana.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
We are glad you made time to be with us this morning. Now, we are talking about youth empowerment because, I mean, the youth are the most high-risk category in our population in Kenya, especially when it comes to employment. So we want to understand what this program is all about and how far it goes to help them get ready for the job market. You know, there are issues here and there with the education system. Is it good enough? Are we churning out half-baked graduates, as it has been alleged before? So we just want to better understand what this program is all about. And maybe we can start with you with a bit of background on, what necessitated you to come up with this organization.
Yeah. So what led me to start Lapid Leaders was more of a personal journey. So when I finished university, which was about 15 years ago, I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a leading audit firm. And one of the things I liked about them is they were very intentional in terms of how they trained, how they mentored, and how they coached us. And so within 3 years, you could see a significant difference between many of the people who are working with PwC and people who are out there. And the difference was primarily because of how they were intentional in terms of training, mentoring, and coaching. And then at some point, I got an opportunity to go to UK and worked about for 2 years. When I came back, and in between that, one of the questions I kept asking is, what's the difference between UK, the developed world, and Kenya, that I absolutely loved? And there were several things that I kept coming across, which were around how intentional they are in terms of raising their next generation. And so when I came back, I worked with GT Bank as the head of risk and compliance for a few years, and at some point transitioned out to run Lapid. And the idea behind Lapid was, can we invest in the next generation of African leaders and help them to become transformational leaders in the marketplace? One of the conversations I kept encountering as I worked with young people and as I interacted with various leaders was the fact that we kept saying that we have what we're calling half-baked graduates. But the question I kept asking is why? Why do we have half-baked graduates? And more importantly, what are we doing about it? And for me, the answer just kept coming around. So one of the things that we did within GTB is we started a mentorship program, and we worked with several people and sort of just helped them with their transition in the workplace. And in the process, I figured out that this is a bigger problem within the market. So we were probably just dealing with 10, 15 people within GT Bank. But how many graduates do we have in? A lot. And so just thought, how about we form an organization whose mission is to work with the youth, and prepare them for the marketplace, but the bigger picture is to get them to be change makers for the continent. And so that's the background within which we started Lapid Leaders Africa.
All right, and maybe I can come to you, Moses. How did you even find out about Lapid Leaders?
Oh, for me, I found Lapid Leaders from a friend. I was referred by a friend.
Okay.
So I just decided to go check it out. Basically, it was entrepreneurial. So I'm all entrepreneurial, business, go global, whatnot. So I just decided to go check it out. So yeah, I came to Lapid Leaders and realized that actually it's not just the business aspect of life, but also you as a person. Like, we tend to not grow as people, but just we focus on the money itself. So for me, I think Lapid was that. it has grown me to be the person who I can go do business with other people.
It has helped you better understand who you are as a person.
Indeed.
Do you feel the youth are misunderstood by the society? Because, you know, as you said, where you are in the UK, there was that intentional approach in mentoring and preparing the youth as opposed to what was here. Maybe by then, it could be different now. But do you feel that the youth are misunderstood in one way or the other?
I think they are.
Yeah.
I tend to think, one of the things I'm very big on within even the program, we sort of just use a lot of understanding of who we are as Africans.
Yeah.
And what are some of the things that we had within the context of Africa that worked really well. And when you think about the African practices, the one thing that's entrenched within our systems is around mentorship. So that's how you always had a lot of rites of passage that would allow your older generation to invest in the next generation. I think there's a season that we went through that became about, can the next generation just figure themselves out on their own? And so everybody kept complaining that the youth are. But when you think about it, every generation has had youth that are unique. But the difference is people have taken time to invest in them. And so I think they are highly misunderstood. And it's primarily because we want to have a generation that's figured themselves out by themselves. Yet there is no generation that has figured themselves out by themselves. It's always been that people intentionally mentor them, intentionally train them, intentionally expose them. But for me, over time, one of the things that has come to be very clear is the problem is not actually necessarily the youth. The problem is us as the citizens. Are we investing in the next generation, or do we want a product or a generation that has just figured themselves out? Yet that has never been the case. We all are a factor of people who invested in us.
But, you know, can we also, looking at the way we were brought up, looking at some of our parents, you know, for the majority of our parents, they had us when they were in their early 20s, 19, 20, 21, up to between 19 and 25. So they grew up with us, as opposed to how things are right now. They grew up with us. Would you blame the youth or even the parents in this situation?
That's a fantastic point you're raising. One of the studies that was done recently by somebody locally, a sociologist, anthropologist, was around this principle that's called a millennial. So globally, there is a whole conversation around how the millennial generation is. And they kept saying that a millennial generation in Kenya and the millennial generation in another country are very different.
Yeah.
And one of the things they went into was to ask the millennial generation, what point were they born? And they kept talking about it was in the early 90s. So there is a fact of many of the parents were young parents. And so even them, they were figuring it out as they went along. But the other side is also the political side. I mean, the economics of Kenya were very difficult in the 90s. Moi era, economically we were struggling, and asking what was the impact of that on parents. They were literally just surviving and getting by. And so there wasn't enough time to be able to ask, what do I need to do for Ngash to be able to be a leader in the next generation? And so I get it, but I think the bigger picture is to say, this is where we are. What do we do about it?
Yeah.
Because in the final end, this is the generation that's going to run the world and going to run the country. And so if we are not investing in them, what we are saying is we have a whole lost generation, and we can't afford that.
So in as much as our parents were, you know, figuring it out with us, we
Yeah.
shouldn't do the same with the generation that is as of now. We
Yeah.
shouldn't let them figure things out on their own,
Yep.
as opposed to how things were back then. Now, let me come to you now, Moses, looking at the education system. Do you feel like, as it is right now, it is doing enough to even prepare you for the job market? Ukitoka hapo nje unajua, I'm ready for this job market. Ama ukitoka inakuanga another reality slapping you. You're like, what?
But no, for me, I don't think, because for my first point would actually be, we have a system where we're actually going to school.
Yeah.
And when you come out of school, you've been prepped to actually think a certain way. Excuse me. We've been prepped to think a certain way. You've been in school, you've been told by your parents, let's say, go do finance, go do accounting. For me, I don't know if that's actually me,
Yeah.
who's supposed to be doing accounting, because I've not discovered myself. So I go do accounting. Going doing accounting, it's not for me. Outside, I come outside and I'm told, come, let's do this, let's do that. You come and think about it and you're like, no, this is not for me. You found that you've wasted almost 3-4 years of your life trying to figure yourself out, because you've not figured yourself out in the beginning. You are told how to live, and that's how I think how society is right now. We are going through a stage where all these things that are happening right now, we are actually being tuned by society or the education system to think a particular way. You come out of school, do this, do that. After here, come here. After this age, you're supposed to be married, you're supposed to have kids. So you've been pre-programmed to actually think a certain way, which you're not supposed to. You're supposed to go through life thinking about you and what you need to do next to elevate yourself. So
there's
for me,
this societal expectation of you.
Indeed.
Go to school, finish, get a job, get married, have kids, and then after that have your life.
Yes.
As opposed to the millennials these days, we're trying to break out of that cocoon, but it's hard. That is why we're being misunderstood.
Yes, and I think the bigger picture for me is our perception of what education is.
Yeah.
Education in the final end is supposed to help you with job readiness, but that's just one aspect of it. A human being is much more than, you're a being, not a
Multifaceted,
doing.
yeah.
And so the purpose of education is to prepare you to be a citizen of the world. And part of that is starting to help you to understand yourself. I always say, if you get nothing else from school and you understand this is who I am, and these are the things that I do really well, and these are the things I'm passionate about, and this is how I can build them, that's enough. The conversation sometimes gets stuck in, I think we're still stuck in the 90s where we used to sing that song of so many vijana, mwisho utapata kazi mzuri sana. Almost like the only thing you're living for when you're going through the whole education system is so many pata kazi mzuri sana. But in the final end, we are beings. And so one of the things that I find that we don't invest enough in is in helping people to understand themselves.
Yeah.
To understand these are the things I'm really good at, and therefore these are the things that I want to do with myself. And that's one of the things that we really focus on within the program. And I think that's what he was alluding to when he said, we raise entrepreneurial leaders. But before we get to the point where you're able to be an entrepreneur, you must have a good understanding of yourself. I'm good at communication, as an example. I'm good at sales. I'm good at, and therefore then I'm able to build a business with that perspective and be able to look out for the things that I don't have. However, if we're raising businesses without even a sense of understanding of ourselves, well, we are raising a short-term businesses that won't last the test of time. So I think there's an element of society has what it expects people should do, and I like that millennials are pushing back. And I think even for all of us, we've got to be, I mean, I always constantly tell people, I meet with a lot of 60, 70-year-olds who, if they were really honest, they'd tell you, I've not lived for myself.
Yeah.
I've lived a life that was written for me. Why do we want to push that to the next generation?
Because you hear so many people, mi nimefanya degree ya wazazi wangu, ndio imehanga hapo kwa kuta, now let me go do mine. Now, do you think even culture will allow our youth to just flourish as it is? Because, you know, culture is very heavy. Here in Africa, it is hard for us to shed it off. And we cannot blame ourselves. It is what we found there. We do not know who came up with some of these laws. We just found them, and it has been hard to let go of them. So do you feel maybe just do we have to work around it, or get to a place where we can shed it to just be able to allow our youth to prosper? Or what do you think the compromise will be? Let me hear from you, Moses.
Yeah, I think we can pick the aspect that help us to move forward. Also maintain the culture, because without a culture, we don't have a people. So I think we can actually pick some aspects of it, use it to actually move forward. But then at the end of the day, we have to maintain our own culture. So for me, I think we can do half-half. What is for you, take it, and then still maintain your own culture.
But how practical is that?
Yeah, I actually think it is, because there's some generational things that have been there but are not needing right now. Such things as FGMs, you know, those are things that are retrogressive. They're not taking us forward. So for me, I would actually say we can take aspects of your language, maintaining your language as a culture, or the things you do as a people, but then certain aspects like FGM, you can now put them aside because they have moved on with time. So for me, I think we can actually pick what is for us and then move along.
All right. And maybe I can hear from you also this whole, you know, we're living also in a very patriarchal setup where the boy child is, you know, culturally superior to the girl child. But now with this new generation, we are empowering our young women and sort of forgetting the young men. Is it that we are turning the coin 180 degrees and forgetting the boy child, because, you know, society has taken care of you, chill. Now let's focus on the girl child.
You know, and I want to pick up on something that he said that I think is very important. One of the things that we do a lot within the program is sort of just help you identify yourself as both an African and as an individual. We have a really rich culture. And the reason I like to say that is because, I'll give you an example. Trevor Noah in US the other day was making fun of how in Silicon Valley, at the moment, they're all trying to copy our barefoot walking around. And there's some studies that are showing that that's the most healthy way of living. Or when you think about organic foods and how they've always been historically African, we have a strong culture and a strong sense of identity. Yeah. Somewhere along the way, we've lost that. And I think even as we have conversations around what works and what doesn't work, and I like what he said, there's some aspects of our culture that works and some aspects that don't work. The thing about us is to ask, how do we balance both sides? And that goes back to also the conversation of patriarchal society and feminism.
And also the struggle, because it's like walking with one foot here and the other there.
Yeah.
And you have to satisfy both sides.
And it's a big struggle. I think if you ask me, one of the biggest issues we have as a Kenyan is around identity. Though we are stuck between, are we African, are we Westernized? And we seem to be torn in between those two. And even this conversation for patriarchal is sort of just a conversation that's stuck between those two. I always say, can we have our own identity? What does that mean? I think men and women are not supposed to compete. And when I look at our history, and I like to look at our history from a prehistorical perspective, we have had issues. But also you find we were also in a space where women were actually, they still had a voice. One of the things that I really enjoyed hearing from my grandma is even growing up, women had a space in society. They would work. The farming wasn't just left to men, as an example. Women also had a space within the farming system. I think there's something that happened during the colonial period that sort of lost our identity, and we're sort of trying to figure out where are we, what do we want to do. So we are in a transition that will continue to be that women have to have a voice, and rightfully so. A society that doesn't give women their voice is half-baked. We cannot have a community where corporates don't give space to women, or politically we don't give space to women. Yeah. That's half a conversation, and it will always be incomplete. But that said, that doesn't mean that we leave behind the boy child. The society works well when men and women are empowered. And that means men also supporting their sisters. For me, what breaks my heart as we have these conversations is it feels like men cannot have a conversation that I'm lifting my sister, or women cannot have a conversation where I'm lifting my brother. We need to get away from this westernized patriarchal or feminism kind of society and build our own communities, our own cultures that lift my brother and lift my sister. Because when we are able to have space that allows both men and women to thrive,
to prosper, yeah,
then the society is at its best.
But do you think people are confusing feminism with, gender biasness?
I think they are, and I don't even think if you ask me, get rid of the terminologies. Ask what works for you. And what works, let's not call it patriarchal or feminism. It works, it's described like this. My brother and my sister. This thing of putting people in boxes that are feminist or patriarchal, that's a Western thing. We've always been such a community that works together as people. And so if we get rid of the terminologies, what is the principle behind it? Yeah. The principle behind it is I want to lift my brother and I want to lift my sister. Whatever it is called is a terminology. I think that's how I look at it.
All right, Moses, now you are a youth. Now, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced, even before you joined the program, out there in the job market? Is it education-wise? Is it the opportunities? Is it mentors? What is it that you could say from a personal point that you actually faced and is real to you as a challenge in the youth category?
I think I would go with several. We have, one, the mentors, availability of mentors. So many youth, I don't know, I'm sure they don't have mentors. Someone to just guide you through life and just show you that these are the mistakes you're gonna make. Yeah. Don't make them now because I made them and these are the results. Just that. We also have the education system itself, how it has been fine-tuned to just teach you to do this particular thing. After this stage, go to this stage. I think that's another one. What else can I do? What else did you ask?
Opportunities for employment.
Also that's also an issue. I'm seeing so many jobs and experience also. I'm seeing so many jobs giving a high level of experience, and we are basically from, you've been taught secondary, then university, and then you're told, now come and apply for a job that you must have 5 years experience. Where am I getting 5 years experience from? I'm just from from the education system that was created to actually give me this job. So for me, I think also that is an issue in itself, the experience level. Opportunities, I think there are various opportunities right now. We have the age of social media. Right now you can be a blogger, I can just sit right now down and just be a blogger. We have videos on YouTube teaching you how to cook, how to throw spears, how to, all these things. So I think opportunities, I wouldn't say they are less. I will actually say they are more. But then for the experience level in corporate, then that's where the issue is for me.
But looking also at the same issue with the youth, would you say that, even the youth, we're not going that extra mile to try and look for the exposure that you may need, go volunteer somewhere, get the experience that you need, could be for 3 months, could be for 6 months, could be for a year. And maybe that year's experience is what you would need for that job out there. In as much as it's asking for 5 years, that 1 year could get you there. But you are not willing to, go out there.
The extra mile.
Volunteer to get a job. You just want to wake up, get hired, make money, buy this, live lavish.
You see, but we had also that conversation with Esther a while back about volunteering. Because for me, I was totally against volunteering until she told me the issue of volunteering.
Why were you against it in the first place? Let's just hear your
my perspective
thoughts,
as a typical youth, you're being told to go volunteer, but then you have nothing. Some organization will just take advantage of you because you've come. You're willing to offer your free services. I usually consider them free services. You're coming offering free services. You're not getting anything in return. And now they've found someone that can actually do even more. Not even the typical job description that is sent to Jane. They know this person can go an extra mile to do this, to do that. So they'll misuse you, if I can use that word. They'll misuse you in a way that once you're done, you're thinking to yourself, what next? But then Esther told me that most people who are volunteering, you volunteer somewhere where you can get base, you can get skills. So now when you're progressing, for me, I used to volunteer anywhere. So I think that's why I was so...
That was the problem.
I was so hard on myself and hard on the organization that hired people who they do not pay at all.
Yeah.
But then she told me, like, you go volunteer somewhere where you can actually gain skills.
Yeah.
Gain those skills, climb the ladder, most do. So yeah, for me, I think that's...
Now, looking at the same issue with now on the side of the organizations, some do take advantage of our youth, hire, get free interns, free labor, 3 months, ditch them, get the next batch. Now, when it comes to this whole sphere, what would you feel organizations need to do, even if you will not retain them, just have a way of compensating them and remunerating them for their efforts that they're there, so that, ultimately, you don't break their morale, you don't break them, so that you will point like, I'm not volunteering again unless it's a job.
So there are two aspects to that conversation, and I really like having comprehensive kind of conversations, because I think we tend to have conversations that are one-sided and halfway through. Though there are several things, and I'll be very honest about this. One, this economy is struggling. And for all of us, we have to first name the problem. We have 40% of unemployment levels in this country, 40% primarily among the youth. The statistics are released sometimes are less because they average among the youth and the elder people. But among youth, 4 out of 10 people are unemployed. That doesn't include underemployment. Underemployment means that somebody is using skills for when they were in standard 3. And somebody was talking about a bulk of the jobs, the study that was done, and they were saying a bulk of the jobs in Kenya are actually jobs in security firms. We are creating jobs where people go and they look after people's property. And the only skill they need is literacy for up until standard 3. That's serious underemployment. So there's a problem. And the problem is the economy needs to build and expand and get more jobs. Until that problem is addressed, you will have organizations misusing people, because it's a case of demand and supply. The reality is that. And that's the reason when I speak to young people, I tell them you have to be really smart. There is a conversation around fighting for your rights, but you also have to be very smart in the context of the realities of the market that we are in.
Yeah.
That's the first part. The second part is, do organizations have a responsibility to train, mentor, and even pay their youth? Yes, they do. If you ask me, even the work that we do within LAPID, I shouldn't do it. It should be done by organizations. I was fortunate enough to have worked with organizations that actually did it. But the truth and the reality of the matter is most jobs are in SME level in this economy. And SMEs are barely surviving, literally barely surviving. this whole issue of access to loans, access to markets. And so if they find a loophole, they run with it. And so I want to speak to organizations from what they should do and what I know they will do.
Or what they ought to do, but they're not doing.
Yeah. And I get it. And that's why I like to look at both sides.
Yeah.
I get it. I run a business. It's a hard job. And so when organizations don't take time to train, to even work with their young people, honestly, I get it. And that's the reason why we're actually starting to work with a lot of organizations to help them come up with mentorship programs, training programs, so that as you as a business leader are struggling to get this business working, at least there's somebody who is helping your teams to get going.
Yeah.
That said, we all have a responsibility to the next generation, whether we like it or not. The people who will buy your products are this generation. If you're not hiring them, you are not creating products and an economy for your own business. So we have a responsibility to train. The conversation I keep hearing is pay interns. Imagine that's the lower level of this conversation. I can pay interns 10, 15,000 shillings to keep moving from one job to another. Does that help you? The bigger picture is we have a responsibility to our youth. And every organization needs to be thinking not just about paying interns, but around how do I train the next generation? And I get the context of it's a hard economy, but how can you partner with people like us to be able to run programs that allow you to equip the next generation, train them, and pay them their dues at any one point in time? But I think the bigger picture is the bigger and larger organizations, especially multinationals.
Yeah.
Those have a huge responsibility. And not to do the bare minimum, which is take 20 students every year at best. Can you run mentorship programs that allow you to be in universities so that then your employees are also spending time with universities? So you're only hiring 20 people, but you have programs that are constantly investing in the next generation. For me, the bigger burden that I have is actually for multinationals. Are they doing enough? If you ask me, they're not. They're doing bare minimum. If you look at the West and you hear of the initiatives that some of these large organizations are running, I mean, I know of many banks locally that hardly do anything. But if you go to the West and you see what they're doing, you would be amazed at the level with which they're engaged with societies. We must challenge multinationals to do more in terms of investing in our youth.
All right. Now, even as you go about your training on a day-to-day basis, what would you say has been the hardest part of your journey while running Lapid Leaders Africa, especially when you are interacting with these young people on a very personal level?
I think my whole job is hard, honestly. I mean, when I look back, I left employment 5 years ago, and I keep saying I was naive. And I thank God for that naivety, because I think if I knew what I knew now, I don't know.
You wouldn't have taken this.
It would be a very different conversation. It's been a rough 5 years. I mean, working with the youth is a hard job. One, they can't afford it. And so we're constantly having conversations around who will pay for these programs. Two, you come to the ground and you find, so when I left employment, to be honest, I thought this was such an easy job. It's helping prepare people for the workplace. How hard can that be?
To the youth.
How hard can this be?
Shock on you.
Shock on me. You go and find that, and the work is big. So the way we've structured the program is we have 3 levels. We start with lead self. I thought I was just going to do lead marketplace, which is around building skills. But you discover that you need to spend so much time coaching, mentoring, helping the person to understand themselves, helping them build the values that matter in society. We had a conversation the other day within the tribe, which is the alumni, and we're talking about how our education needs to get away from these technical skills alone and start to build grit, start to build work ethic, because in the final end, that's what matters. And I found that that's a job that's a huge job.
Because it's really hard to change somebody who has grown knowing this thing. It's hard to change a grown-up.
It's a hard job, but I enjoyed it because, I mean, when I look at some of the stories that we've had, I've had guys right now who are in Ghana who, this student comes to my mind every time I think about what we are doing. He was in campus, he was in UN, he was joined, I think, in second year, and I could see a lot of potential in him, but he could also see that he wasn't clear on what he wanted to do with himself. He was running a DJ on the side, but there was a lot of trying to figure out, who am I? But right now, he's an entrepreneurial leader in Ghana. There's a partnership we have with an organization called Meltwater, Melt Entrepreneurial School of Technology, and they get some of our students to go through their one-year fellowship program. And I look at him doing posts, he's teaching people, he's building products.
Yeah.
And I remember the guy who walked into the class that was clueless. Or I think about, I was recently selected for the Obama Fellowship, and I was one of the 3 people who got the opportunity. And the people who were running this whole the PR behind it was one of my students. Somebody who was in cohort 1, who I remember when he joined, he was a second-year student in KU. And we used to have conversations that would make me think, oh my God, will he ever settle in this life? But now he's in a PR firm doing extremely well for himself. He's the one who was running our PR, and I was so proud of him. So yes, hard job, but the possibilities are immense. I think the greatest asset that we have as a continent is our youth.
Yeah.
It will take time. It will take every resource I have, every resource you have, every resource that this continent have. But if we do a good job of this, the kind of opportunities that exist for the youth are immense. This coming weekend, we have a masterclass. You're calling it a masterclass for around the opportunities in the creative sector. And we have mentors who will be coming to talk about, we live in such a different world today. The capital is very different. Before, you couldn't start a job without economic capital. Now what you need is social and intellectual capital. And our job is to build that. So though a hard process, but it's also the most rewarding process.
Can't give up now.
What you said.
All right. Now, you have just mentioned, the whole aspect of there's so many opportunities for the youth out there, but are the youth aware of these opportunities? Do you think the young people are actually going out and networking and just interacting with people to get exposed to different cultures, different working environments, different working ethics out there, as opposed to just sitting there and waiting?
I think we have 2 scopes. We
Yeah.
have one scope that is really into it, because as you can see, the rise in bloggers, the rise in entrepreneurs, so YouTubers, the rise in this other sector this other segment of youth that is really focused to move forward. But then there's another sector of youth that is playing the blame game, going to the government. The government is not giving jobs. The government is not doing enough. We can barely afford our basic needs, but then you're not willing to go that extra mile. And I think it dials down to not knowing yourself, because you're here blaming the government, but then you have this particular issue in you that's maybe a procrastinator. I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it the next day, I'll do it, or maybe just intellectual laziness, as she said. You're just willing to sit down and accept reality for what it is, which is not reality, it's your own mental aspect of reality. So I think for us youth, I think there are 2 segments for it, because I can't say we are all like tumelala si wote, but I can say that I think there's a segment of the youth that actually needs to wake up.
Smell the coffee. Do you agree with him?
Absolutely. I fare with the youth a lot. My perception is actually slightly different from what he's saying. There's something he said earlier. He said the many youth don't have access to mentors. I see the exact opposite. I have 100 people who are willing to mentor the youth, but what they don't want to do is babysit. We have to get the youth to grow up and take responsibility for their lives. Though there is no, and we say this a lot within the program, there is no one coming to save people.
No savior coming.
Sorry?
There's no savior coming.
There's no savior coming.
Save
You
yourself.
have to take responsibility for your life.
Yeah.
And that involves, and I've seen this, even with some of our alumni, people who, we don't want to take responsibility for what is where we are at right now. And so the challenge for the youth is to get out. There are immense opportunities, but there are immense opportunities in a limited world. And that therefore means it's the person who goes the extra mile, the person who goes and tries and figures out what are the opportunities that exist, how do I do my work excellently so that I'm standing out. That's a person who is able to go forward. In an economy that's struggling, the person who is able to go the extra mile, there's a quote I like, always go the extra mile, it's never crowded. So imagine in an economy like ours.
That's a very nice statement.
If you can learn to go the extra mile, be the person who's constantly going the extra mile. We get used to mediocrity and doing minimum and waiting for people to come and save us.
Bare minimum for that matter.
Yeah. But if you train for yourself, I am a believer, and I have over time, the one thing I've asked God to teach me is to learn to have an audience of one. That everything I do as unto God. And that means I go the extra mile, not for the accolades, not for anybody, but because I have an audience of one. And I think that's something that we need to inculcate in our youth.
Yeah.
Because honestly, and I know he's separated. There are those who are willing to go the extra mile, but there is a huge crowd that's waiting for miracles and is constantly on social media, constantly on Instagram, on Twitter, waiting. Life is not waiting for you, imagine. It's moving.
Inakupita tu.
Inakupita. And it's not fair, but it is the truth.
Yeah.
You have to find a way of stepping in and taking ownership of your life.
Now, let's talk a bit about, financial skills, especially for our youth.
Oh my God.
We're living in a time where there's so many financial lending services left, right, and center. If you have like a group of 10 young people here, I can guarantee you at least 3 of them will have a money lending app, this instant money lending apps. Yet some of them don't have jobs to pay this, to loans back. Consequently, getting rated, poor ratings by the CRB, and then they're blacklisted. That's already a hurdle on their financial progress in future. Now, when it comes to financial skills, what are you doing towards this end to help our youth understand money? It's good to have it, but keeping it is the problem, because getting it is not a problem. Bet, ikivana, yukula, but you blow that money. You don't know how to keep it. Now, when it comes to keeping money, what do you advise our youth towards this end? Let me first hear from here, because I can see you nodding here and there. You understand the shida betting that we have. Fine, it's a source of quick money, but it comes and goes. You
Really
get 20 grand today, tomorrow you don't have it.
not.
So getting money is not a problem. Keeping money is the biggest problem with our youth. What do you have to say towards this end?
First of all, I think I'll burn some bridges with some friends of mine, but it's all right. I think for me, betting is not a real quick solution, because for me, I've done finance and there's no any topic in finance where the rate of return you will actually get as according to the betting. You put 50 shillings and expect to get, 100 million, in a jackpot.
Yeah.
That's not realistic at all. So for me, I think betting is one thing that's really a mind stagnant for the youth. I've also realized that so many youth are in the borrowing of this quick cash.
Fintech, yeah.
And you're borrowing to satisfy yourself today. I call it IG, instant gratification. You're borrowing it for today. Today I'll borrow 5K, we go have coffee, and then we are done. Tomorrow, how am I supposed to pay this 5K? Eating it is really hard, because spending it is like, pop.
Quick.
Earning it now, once you come to the ground, and that's why I think if we knew all this from Lapid when I was in school, I think I would be really far ahead, but I have no regrets. If most people or most youth knew the aspect of borrowing, and then you cannot pay it back.
Bad debt,
that's it. You cannot pay it back, but then now you're 27 years, really you need to start this business, but you cannot go to a bank to ask for a loan that this business can actually succeed.
Because you have a poor credit score.
And it's not because this money helped you at that time.
Yeah.
That need already ended, and most probably it was not even a need, it was a want. So for me, I think borrowing, how we are taught in life about finances, I think that's where we are going wrong. And with social media as well.
Yes. Also the way we are brought up. We are brought up, when you go to school, you're given, this is what you need for fare, kwenda na kurudi. So you are used to this idea of not always having some money. And it's always on the extreme divide. Either you have a lot of it, or you've grown up with not enough of it. So when you have this freedom where you can be able to access it, you go for it without thinking about it. When it comes to financial literacy, does it need to be incorporated even from the, our colleges, our universities, or even after school and as you progress with your working life?
So I'm just asking myself where I want to start with this conversation, because I think it's a long conversation.
Yeah.
But I like what you just said. There's several things that come to mind. Number one, so let me just focus on 3 things so that I just sort of don't go too far. One is government has a responsibility to its citizens. The mess we are in, so I'm a banker by profession, I've worked in banks, my background was in PwC, but I audited a lot of banking. Our banking system is broken. this thing of capping interest rate was a mess. And the
In what sense, from your point of view?
so what happens when people don't have access to some normal form of, so what happened is capped interest,
Yeah.
and that worked for people who are employed because those are able to access interest,
Yeah.
I mean lower interest kind of loans. Most of us are not employed in this economy. We are unemployed. And because of that, or we're running businesses, banks became stringent in terms of risks. And so they wouldn't give loans to SMEs, wouldn't give loans to people who are starting out. And what happens every time there's a gap is a market will emerge. That's called fintech in the nice world, but in the finer end is a Shylock. Interest rate capping needs to be rethought.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, the problem with a lot of issues that we're having with the youth around loans and all that is a values problem. It's that we haven't taught our youth to think from a values perspective. We've built a world that hot air sells. I mean, if you look at even a lot of our politics, if you want to get ahead in this country, have a scandal and you will become a leader. What that does is it builds a culture where values are not valued.
What bleeds leads.
Yes. And because of that, I mean, to expect the youth to be different, and that's why I keep saying the youth are the fruit of the society. What have we taught them? We've taught them that hot air is how you make money. So they've just created their own hot air. Previous generations had drugs, I could get into politics how I want. They created sports pesa. The thing with the youth, show them, they will do better than the previous generation. So it's easy to blame them, but it's a reflection of who we are. It's the lack of values that's causing us to move from betting to Shylocks. We must get the youth to learn a conversation of instant gratification has never worked.
Yeah.
Do the work of building a foundation. We live in an age of social media where people are aiming to live a life that's not real.
It's a lie.
When you think about even the mental health issues that we are having, a lot of them are anchored around social media comparison. So we need to do a lot of work on self that allows an individual to be okay with, I have 20 bob, nitatembea, my friends are in a car that is having high music, but it is well. Kutangulia siyo kufika. So it looks like it's a money conversation, but money is the symptom. The problem, the underlying problem is values. That we have zero values, and because of that, whatever it takes for me to go ahead, I will do it. That's the second thing. The last thing is financial literacy. But it's in that order. If you run to financial literacy and you don't deal with values, it's a waste of time. Because financial literacy borrows from, okay, what are the values?
What values that are
The values
inculcated?
are I work hard.
Yeah.
The values are that I don't have to get what I want today. I must be willing to wait. If those values are sorted, then now this is what money is. Money is a tool. Money is not supposed to be a god.
It's a
So
means
how
to
do
an
I
end.
build a tool that works for me?
Yeah.
And that's what financial literacy is. And the point I want to make around financial literacy is personally, and I've seen this work in the West a lot. I just came back from US about 2 weeks ago, and some of the leading financial literacy programs are being run by multinationals. And that's why I keep going back to our companies locally. You need to be doing more.
As opposed to what they're doing now. Now, so if I'm getting you right, in as much as we are blaming the youth for the way they are behaving now, it is what we have. They're just mirroring the society.
They're just doing a better job than we did before, which is what the youth will always do.
Show them something good, they will go over and above with it. Show them
Yeah.
something negative, they will surpass your expectations with it. So what you feed, they will only make it better.
Yep, way better.
Depending the direction you're taking it. All right, so as we just bring the conversation to an end, you had mentioned about a masterclass. Maybe tell us a bit more about it, because there's somebody actually who's asking what should be expected, where it will be, and what can they come, and how can they even get access to this masterclass if it's open to the greater public?
It's open to the greater public. So how we run is we have cohorts. And so we pick students and we work with them for a period of time. We don't do big bang things. We do process. So you first come in for 8 weeks. You have a class that runs for 8 weeks. And there's a class that's starting on 8th June. And you can get more information on that on our website or on our social media.
Okay.
Next weekend, we have an open event. It's sort of an open event. We have mentors within the creative sector, we have the MD for Kaka Empire, who will sort of talk about his journey around building the Kaka empire and around the entertainment industry and the things that are coming up. We have a lady called Rehob Bashago, who's running a lifestyle, an award-winning lifestyle blogger, who will be talking about content development and her journey around that. We have a photographer who will be having a practical session around how do the youth get into the business of photography and creative around that space. And we have somebody who will be talking about personal branding. We have somebody in the fashion industry who will be talking about her journey around building a fashion industry. What am I saying? You need to be with us next weekend.
Where will that be happening?
It will be at Graffin's College, which is in Westlands. You can get information on our social media.
Yes.
So if you go to our Facebook, Lapid Leaders Africa, you go to our Twitter, you go to our Instagram. At Lapid Leaders, you will get a lot of information around that.
You'll get all the information that you need about that masterclass that will be happening on the 8th.
The masterclass is this Saturday, but if you want to join the main program, it's on 8th. So come for the masterclass so that then you're able to get all the information around both of them.
All right, so thank you so much for just coming through and sharing with us a bit about, what you do and some of the issues that are facing the youth. It is not a discussion that we can exhaust in one sitting. Matters concerning the youth, we need to be having these conversations over and over again until we get to a point that, we are able to let our youth prosper without fearing that, things will not go as planned. So thank you so much for coming through. We do hope that, Lapid Leaders Africa just goes the extra mile in helping our youth be better prepared for the reality when you get out here. All right. We have been speaking with Esther Moniki. She is the CEO and founder of Lapid Leaders Africa, as well as Moses Nganga. He is a student at Lapid Leaders Africa. Thank you so much. We do hope that, from this discussion, we're able to keep the conversation going. All right. So we want to take a quick break, but remember, we have another discussion coming up next with Bide Muema, who is the director of Konza board of the Konza board. She's just coming to talk to us about her journey as well. We'll be looking at putting a focus on women at the forefront. So stick around to catch up with that discussion. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after this commercial break.